Welcome to Unlocking Moves, where we're going to cover the key decision points and pivotal moments that really change the trajectory of successful entrepreneurs and leaders. And I want to hear their real life stories, not just the glory stories, but also the gory stories. Because as I like to say, the bigger the shit show, the bigger the lesson. Speaking of glory and gory stories, my guest today, Autumn Manning, has a lot of them. I can't wait to hear. But before we get to that, Autumn, I have a special way I like to start each of my episodes, and that is with an off-putting question or comment that really makes you think, puts you on your heels. All right, you ready for this?
Okay, we'll see. I'm ready.
All right, here we go. I had two ways to go with this. I went with the second way. The first way I was going to go with it is you like to tweet about tacos a lot, like an unhealthy amount of tweets about tacos. We're going to skip that one. But here's the one I want to ask. You've said on more than one occasions that one of your bucket list items is to have a conversation with Mike Tyson. So I've got two questions. First of all, why? And second of all, I've got Mike Tyson right here for you. So what is your question you're going to ask Iron Mike?
Okay. As you're asking me this, I could feel my heart rate increasing because this is the one person that I have thought in my head, when I see him, not if I see him, what am I going to say? And I think he's probably the only person that I would have to really think about it. So my question is kind of a bailout, which is, will you please go to dinner with me? I really just want for Mike Tyson. So he's had just a big influence in my life from when I was younger. My stepdad is, he's Puerto Rican from the Bronx. He used to force me to watch Iron Mike in his heyday. And at the time when I was 6, it's just, oh God, kill me because it's getting more boring. But I appreciated learning the skill and watching. At that time, I'm sure you remember watching Iron Mike at that time. And it was just the skill and just watching that and learning that sport kind of firsthand from, my stepdad's commentary of just deeply loving the art and the skill of boxing and Iron Mike and where he came from. So certainly that was an influence, but I really, really appreciate anybody who is human, has a story, and they have the strength and the courage to open up and expose themselves to the world of that authentic story of truth. And Iron Mike, he has this way of just being incredibly raw, sharing all the good and the bad. You talk about, what did you say, glory and gory stories? That guy has some gory stories. And it's just this beautiful reminder of no one is perfect. Everyone has a story. And if you take the time to see the person, understand them, and really see kind of what's behind the person and what makes them who they are, I really, really appreciate how he kind of shows up in life, the good, the bad, exposes it all, and has clearly learned. He's become this really enlightened dude over the years. I don't know if you've ever heard about his podcast, Hot Boxing with Mike Tyson. You have to buckle up and be ready for it. But he really shares a lot of his lessons and his failures and what he learned. And most importantly, I think to me, is just the role of just mentors who saw something in him and the trajectory it took his life on. And I think that's just a human story that's relatable for anybody. So, yeah.
And I love that question because I learned so much about you, and our audience learned so much about you in that last 30 seconds about your empathy and your interest in connecting, your inquisitive mind, your feeling for the stories of others, especially the get off your ass type stories of Iron Mike. So, man, I love it. Not get off your ass, but get knocked on your ass and get back up stories.
Well, it's both. It's you get knocked on your ass and you get back up and get off your ass and you go at it again. And so the other part that is just as intriguing to me is being great is freaking hard work. Building something great, it's not easy. You have to do things people wouldn't do. You have to wake up when people wouldn't wake up. There's no scenario that you would convince me and I would believe that it was easy to become the world champ at the age he did. That is hard work that takes hustle and grit, and that he calls it, that monster kind of comes out. But if it's not tamed and if it's not encouraged and not really kind of molded to be put in the right direction, bad things can happen. I think that's actually just a story about leadership, quite frankly. It's not easy, really, really hard. It's not for the faint of heart, but you really need your village, your tribe around you, helping you be the best version of yourself. So hopefully over dinner one day, he'll give me some pointers of how I can do that.
I love it. I love it. Autumn, thanks so much for sharing that. So as you can tell, my guest today is my good friend, Autumn Manning, who is, I didn't know, is an aficionado of boxing. She's also my go-to resource when it comes to people and culture. She has been a successful entrepreneur with a high-tech, fast-growing tech company in Austin called You Earned It, which is an employment engagement platform, which she sold to Vista Equity, which is a great exit. She had started her career with SVI, really as a guru in the organizational development arena. She has a degree from the University of Arkansas, so she's a fellow Hog.
Go Hogs.
Go Hogs! I brought my hat here for you. We could,
yes.
Well, if you'll get yours, we'll call the Hogs here later.
Thank you.
Welcome to Unlocking Moves Automating.
I love you even more, Kurt, for putting that hog hat on. And don't you think 2 seconds that I don't have two of those in my background that the kids and I sometimes put on when I would like to taunt the UT people who come over to our house.
Oh, let's go. We can all hate UT together. I love it. Don't tell anybody in my family that I just said that. If you're just joining us on Unlocking Moves, today's episode is brought to you as usual by HireBetter, the strategic talent partner for growth-minded entrepreneurs everywhere. Autumn, you have such a great story from psychology major at Arkansas to SVI, where you worked with some amazing clients. I'd love to hear a little bit about that. And then founding a tech company in a male-dominated VC tech-focused world here in Austin. You earned it with a successful exit. I'd love to hear some of the stories along the way, some lessons learned, anything you'd like to share from your journey.
Oh gosh, there's so much. There's so many. And you were right in the beginning that most of the lessons that I carry with me, I kind of put them in two camps. There's some things that I look back and I go, man, I was right and my intuition was right. And that is kind of courage building, especially for any entrepreneur and for a female entrepreneur, when you don't see a lot of lessons ahead of you of what great leadership looks like. There's more and more today, which is so great. But way back when, in 2013, when I co-founded You Earned It in Arkansas, where Go Hogs, all great tech companies are built, there weren't a lot of examples of, female tech leaders that you can look at and say, oh, okay, that looks natural to me. And so I want to be that. And that's actually one of the lessons I look back on is even I, at the time, and my path to being CEO of You Earned It was an interesting kind of twisty, turvy path where I almost refused to be CEO. So I did co-found You Earned It with a good friend of mine and an entrepreneur in town now. We both kind of moved this way together in Austin when we were going to scale the business. But there was a big part of that where I refused to actually be in the CEO spot. The gentleman's name is Kenny, my co-founder, and he was talking to me about this idea. It sounded fascinating. I had just come off of 10 years of building and helping build SVI and just being deeply immersed in, yes, building that company with the team we had there, but big brands, anything around creating irresistible companies and extraordinary people, we focused on. So I always view what I've done for my whole career as just kind of auditing culture and human behavior, which is my favorite thing to do. And in college, I studied precursors to psychopathic behavior in children.
Dude, people like you scare me because what are you thinking about me right now?
Well, you already got past it because you put that hog hat on, so we're good. But it really spent a lot of time then just studying teams. Studying leadership, what does great leadership look like? What is the chemistry of a great team and culture look like? And how do we get from here to there? Whether you're working with Walmart or Tyson Foods or a healthcare organization. So that was 10 years of just deeply immersing myself in businesses, big or small, cultures that are, as different as you could possibly get, but with one goal, which is how do we create irresistible companies and extraordinary people? And how do we measure it? How do we map it? How do we know if it worked? So I spent tons of time doing that, which, I would be so happy if I was just coding behavior in the lab all day. Turns out, I actually tried to do that. Turns out you can't get paid very much when you actually have a family. So did that for a long time. And as Kenny was talking to me, I was ready to move on. I was really exhausted after 10 years. And I was tired for a couple of reasons. One, building a company's hard. And we had really, really big clients, awesome clients, and we did great work for them. During that time as we built that company, I'd had 2 kids. I was the breadwinner of my family. My youngest was very sick towards the end of my tenure at SVI. And so Marin, who is now almost 14, but at the time, at 6 months, she started just showing symptoms of just becoming sick. And so I was traveling all around the country with work. We'd get a call, Marin was sick again, got rushed to the hospital. And so it was a couple of years of that. And as any entrepreneur will tell you, it is not a part-time job. It is not kind of a part-time job. I have tried my whole life to save me from myself and just kind of show up to work. But if I am invested and interested in something, that gear is crammed down and that is full focus despite my best attempts not to. And I know that about myself, which is really important to know who you are when you're stepping into a leadership role. So all that being said, Kenny and I were having lunch one day. He was telling me about this idea that he had around what eventually became You Earned It. And for lots of reasons, I said, I'm not going to be CEO. First of all, who are you looking at? I'm not a CEO. So there was that thought that went through my mind. But more importantly, at the time, knowing myself, I knew that it was going to be impossible for me to be the mother I needed to be. We were about to embark on a journey, another journey of marriage, surgeries, and continuing to be sick. And so I needed to make sure I saved me from myself. So I said I would do it, but not a CEO, only if we found a CEO. And so built the original product, built the original team, spun it out, moved to Austin, got good traction, and we hired a CEO. So glad. One of the lessons I learned is the title really doesn't matter. I thought maybe if I just don't have the title, but the deep passion and interest in kind of that vision of a better place that we had with You Earned It just was calling me all the time. So the CEO we hired, he was great. I always think about him as Michael Jordan in baseball, maybe, phenomenal athlete, but he was just in the wrong sport at the wrong time. So
nice analogy. Let's go. Boxing and baseball, Michael Jordan. We're going all over the place, right? Let's go. I'm
always very careful because usually I mix up a sports analogy. Like I'll mix them, like the first part will be one sport, the second part will be another sport, but hopefully I got that one right.
Well, you did, because he's a basketball player that tried to play baseball. And so you were using it exactly correctly.
Yeah.
Well done.
But I got a text from my co-founder and that one Friday night and said, "You're up on Monday. You should have taken the job in the first place." And that was really my path into the formal CEO role. And so, one of those lessons I look back on is one, which was a good one. I knew myself well enough to know when you're building a company and you have this vision of a better place in your mind and you have this deep desire to change things for the customer, there's just no shutting it off. It is not a part-time job. It is not a, balance, 9 to 5. Yes, you can figure out how to navigate that world, but it is not a part-time job. It is always in you. And so I knew myself well enough to be really thoughtful before I stepped into the role. But I also look back and I learned, I think I did that thing that a lot of women do sometimes, where you don't see behavior that resonates with you. You don't see leadership in front of you go, I would do that. So I couldn't really relate to the behavior I was seeing from CEOs in front of me. So I just assumed I wasn't a CEO. For a long time, I told myself, I'm a great number 2. And that might be true, but it really held me back from leaning in sooner than I probably should have.
I like it. What it sounded like you needed, and it sounds like what you would do for other entrepreneurs, is be a mentor and support them. Yeah. And so you lacked that female mentorship, it sounded like, early in
you. Yes and no. I have always been, and this is always advice I give any leader, whatever role you're in, any person who has a desire to grow in their life and in their career. I actually always shot high for mentors. I had Kenny was one of my mentors, still is one of my good friends and mentors, female and male mentors. But what I lacked was no CEOs that were female. I had no mentors that actually did that job. And so that specific job, in my mind at the time, I guess I just thought, people go to CEO school and you do CEO things, and I have not done that. So let's hire a CEO. And it was just a story I told myself that just wasn't true.
I love that. That head trash can get in our ways many times, impact our confidence, impact our mojo. And it sounds like that did it for you. But now you've overcome that. And part of your story is to help others overcome that, it sounds like.
It is. It's to help others overcome that. But I will go back to maybe another one of the things you asked, which is some of the gory stories. So those are nice ways to look back on the past, these lessons learned and insights. But oh my gosh, there were a lot of really hard lessons learned, only the hard way that they can be learned, which is through
mistakes. Go. Tell me some. Those are the shit shows we learn the most from, Autumn. Let's go. What you got?
Yeah. One of the biggest, hiring is one of these things that we all say, it's such an important thing, find the right people on the bus. But when you look at our hiring practices, it is really easy to be asleep at the wheel, if you will, when you're building a venture-backed tech company and you're being expected to go fast. And once you step on that trajectory, it is fast-paced, high intensity, high expectations, and most people don't make it. And that's just the reality of building a venture-backed tech company. Most will fail. And so that I'm just painting a picture of the complexity of the decision-making you have and the necessity to still be intentional. So one of our biggest roles was a We were actually well established by this point in time. I think we had a team of 40 something, close to 100 customers, and I still hadn't found the right VP of sales. So despite my intuition and despite the parameters and the things that we had put in place as a company and culture, culture was a huge priority for us. And it was not just the fluffy things you hear about culture, but it was the operational infrastructure we put in place from day one. I needed to bring on a VP of sales. I was about to go back out and raise money, and I could not do it. I could not keep running sales. I mean, we had a large sales organization, a large SDR organization, and things were cranking, and I am drowning in deal reviews. And I just thought, if I have to go through one more deal review and hit the road and raise money, I can't do it. Like, I'm gonna have a heart attack. So there's this gentleman who everyone's like, you got to get him, you got to get him, you got to get him. You'll never get him. You know, anytime someone says that to me, that clicks in. I'm like, well, then I got to get him. He must be the guy. Hired someone, and he is a really, really great sales leader in town. But it felt wrong when we were interviewing him. And quite frankly, he actually didn't pass our culture interview. But pressure, high pressure. We don't have time. We got to fill the role. And I thought, I must be wrong. It must be me. I must not be seeing something. And so I hired him anyway, hit the road, finally closed our A round. And I remember coming back, and, you know, I'm speeding through timelines here, about 6 months of time here. And first of all, it didn't feel right how we interacted with each other. But sometimes when you haven't done the job before specifically, it's hard to know what you're hiring for. And so I'd fallen into that as well. And all the people who knew better than me were telling me, no, you're wrong. He's the guy. I must be wrong. Long story short, and maybe part 2 of this podcast, I can tell you the royal mistake that I made with that. But needless to say, it was the wrong hire. Closed our A round. And I remember going home, seeing the money hit the bank on a Friday evening. It was Q1 of a new year. Went and had a drink with a girlfriend, and she's like, "Are you excited?" And I was like, "No, there's something going on, and I got to now get back in the business and figure it out." The reason I knew that, though, I will say, is because I had never, ever lost sight of a connection to the customer, which is really critical. Is a huge thing that I think is of huge importance. And when I say customer as a CEO, I mean our internal customer, which is our employees, and that external customer. I wasn't hearing the same types of questions. The energy had changed and the closing motion had changed. So long story short, I had to go and write our new board 2 weeks after we closed our A round. Hey, not only are we not going to hit, I think our goal was something to the tune of 1.5 million in new bookings that quarter. Okay. I just said it was the first month of a new year. And in a recurring revenue business, if you miss that first month, good luck catching up. We didn't kind of miss. So emailing them saying, I don't really know, but it's not there. So that number 1 was very hard because, you know, you're sitting here thinking like, oh God, everyone says this happens and now I'm that person. 2 weeks later, I emailed the board and I said, we're not going to get even close. We're going to hit anywhere from 200 to 400K. So I'll spare all the details of what I did, but what I will say is by the time we missed and got right within that range, again, the board was still not supportive of me letting this gentleman go, with the exception of my co-founder, who knew me very well and would never question my judgment. And I let the board, even then, I let me, actually, not the board, I let me rely on their judgment to make the hard call. And I remember going home one weekend and going, there's no way I would let us miss for Q2. Like, I'll kill myself trying. And if we make it, I'm just covering up the problem. If we miss, it's still my problem. And so I came back the next Monday, and instead of asking the board's opinion, I said, here's what I'm doing. Here's the plan. If you have any feedback that can help me make this easier, please. Otherwise, I'll let you know how it goes. They're like, great, good luck. We're here. And I just remember thinking, shame on me for making the mistake to think that they run the company, that they're going to give me the answers that I need. It's like that book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. They're all hard things. And you have to make a decision when you don't have all of the information that you want. That was a huge lesson. The other lesson was the culture we built leading up to that point in time afforded me the grace to stand in front of them and admit the mistake that I made. They didn't make the mistake, I made the mistake. And look at the company and say, I recognize this was my mistake, but we are not ending this year with less cash in the bank. So we got to figure it out. And they did. And so there's a good news, bad news lesson. but I'm never going to make that mistake again.
And there's a couple of key points that I just heard in there. One is your investors aren't smarter than you just because they have capital and put money in the business. They can give you advice and counsel, and you can take it in and absorb it, but you don't have to follow whatever they suggest. So kudos to you for taking the lead on that. And the second is building that culture of trust with your team so that you can afford yourself to make a mistake, and that they're not going to judge you because of one mistake. So well done. And I know that one of the things you talk about, Autumn, is the hardest problems are the people problems. And you also use this phrase, the CEO superpower around people. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think it relates to your story.
Yeah. I mean, so, when I talk about the superpower, sometimes I think about, you hear a lot of times when you're raising money, like, why this, why now, why you? And you kind of have to answer that. And I never realized until I was, in the thick of the role, how I kind of came into the role of CEO with a superpower of really understanding people and having the ability to see the people in front of you, which sounds really simple. And in fact, it is actually really simple. But we get so busy with process and finance and forecast and all of this stuff that sometimes we forget to look at the people right in front of us and really have that conversation of, what do we want to build here? And you really do have to create the culture you want. As cheesy as that sounds, you have to cultivate the culture you want. And you cannot create this amazing culture without defining it, without getting alignment around it. Sometimes that alignment comes in the form of core values and what those look like and feel like across your company. But I had done the work in the beginning to really define, like, what should this company do for people? If we're going to set out and change the world externally through a culture and performance, I mean, who buys a culture platform? Well, turns out, something that seems like a nice to have is anything but a nice to have. I was interviewing the CEO of Casasa, and I remember he told me one time, culture is insurance when things go wrong because it goes wrong. And that was such a great way to say that. And so that investment you make in the early days of really defining the culture you want, defining those values that matter, those values that translate through to service to the customer. Those are the things that keep people there when things go bad. Those are the things that create an adaptable workforce when you need to stand in front of your company and say, crap, I totally screwed up. Because the reality is we all do. And so there's a little bit in there too that I'm really highlighting, which is the necessity of authenticity and vulnerability. And I know these are buzzwords a lot of people say, but we all can kind of remember a time when we have to stand in front of people and kind of break yourself wide open and be vulnerable. It's very hard. But that's the culture I wanted to create. And that culture paid off for us many times because, as people say, it's never up and to the right. It's like you feel like you're barely going to live to fight another day so many times until you look up and you're like, wow, that kind of worked. And so culture is not one of these buzzwords for me. It is the operational effectiveness and kind of the strength from within that you're going to need if you want to spend less time, waste less time, and actually get to where you're going faster and stronger.
Well, I love it. I know you built that. You earned it. You helped other companies achieve it with You Earned It. And then you shifted gears and you became operating partner and entrepreneur in residence at Motley Fool's Ventures, which you're building off of your previous success, but you also are now working on the investor side, working with founders. Can you tell me a little bit about that nuance and maybe lessons that you're able to help your founders and entrepreneurs work through from your previous experience?
Yeah. So Motley Fool Ventures, the Motley Fool is just such an interesting company, about a 30-year-old company, still founder driven. And I came to know them because they were an early customer. And this is a little bit of a lesson too, that is baked in here for entrepreneurs, is I deeply knew them. I knew them before I took their capital. I knew what they were like. I knew kind of how they showed up in the room. I knew what they cared about and their values. A lot of times entrepreneurs, when they're raising capital, it is a brutal, and especially right now, the environment is very, very hard and it's not going to get easier anytime soon. And it's easy to get in your head and think that you are kind of showing up and please give me your money. Please give me your money because I just need to go back and build this business and stop talking to these people I don't really want to talk to. That's kind of what it feels like on the entrepreneur side. So one, I knew them. I understood their DNA. I understood their culture and I really liked what I saw. So when I needed to raise an inside round, I called them and asked, would they be interested in closing my round? And by that time, it's important. This is another lesson. I had options. Options didn't come easy. That royal mistake I just described came before that, a CTO giving me a goodbye when I had to let him go and broke all of our code in our platform.
Oh, jeez.
That happened before that. So things happen all the time. And so by the time I was going for external capital, we had built a resilient, high performance company. So I knew I had options, which is one of the most important things to remember is you do have options, but it does take a lot of, kissing a lot of frogs to find your prince when you are raising money. And so one is just really finding an investor, a culture of a firm, how they make decisions, who's making the decisions, what do they care about? How do they get an A? And it's okay to show up and court them as much as they should be courting you. That's one big lesson. And now sitting on this side of the table, I'm really proud of how Motley Fool Ventures actually does take the time to be authentic and open to the entrepreneur. It is a very, very hard endeavor running a business, number one, and then having to pause what you love to do and spend most of your time begging for money. When most VCs barely look at you when you're doing it. Some are great. Some are kind of too busy to look up and pay much attention to the entrepreneur sitting in front of them. And so one thing that it is reinforced is the necessity for working optionality into your model. Smart growth over growth at all costs. Really staying deeply connected to that customer so that you're not questioning, am I giving value? Are they going to renew and return or expand? So never losing sight of that customer connection that helps you build out optionality when you need it. And when you're taking venture capital, it is very expensive capital to take. So the other advice I always give entrepreneurs is know what you're getting into. Know the customer on the other end. Know what the success profile looks like for that investor and find the investor that's right for you. It takes work, just like closing deals takes work and building early revenue takes work. I usually kind of take on the hat, like kind of that go-to-market hat when I'm working with entrepreneurs. And it's just, let's build your funnel. Find your people, find your firm.
Does it look like this hat?
That's the hat I wear. It is. I'm like, listen, if we're going to talk, put on the hat.
So a couple of things I learned there. First, have options. And options is not just where you're going to get your capital, but do you need capital? You can build a company that's resilient and doesn't require capital. It's going to give you a lot more optionality. And then as you're seeking capital, have options on the table so you're not beholden to one firm, and make sure you do your homework and that you really get to know them and see what they're all about. So you don't just make a decision that's financial and it's going to come back and bite you in the end. Great advice.
Well, you summarized that so nicely, Kurt. And I want to reinforce one of those pieces, which is it's not easy. When people used to say that to me, I'd be like, yeah, great, have options. If I could just have one term sheet, then maybe I could get another. I'm just trying to get one. It's hard work. And when you're in this sea around you where everything is go, 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 grow, 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 venture, 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 it requires thoughtfulness and intentionality to make sure you know what you need for you and your team and your customers. For many years, Kenny and I would step back and ask, hold on, do we need venture capital? We know capital is necessary. What type of capital is necessary? What's the pros and cons of this type of capital versus that type of capital? Where is this venture firm in the life cycle of their fund? So there's all of these really important questions that we as investors don't necessarily have time to kind of expose open to the entrepreneur who's meeting with us. But I always try to help entrepreneurs understand, like, find out those details, understand the customer, make sure you know what that capital is going to feel like in your boardroom, because that's also some of those gory lessons. Maybe it's for part two, but there are times that I have taken capital and I thought I knew what the capital was going to do, and I did not. And it was very, very hard in the boardroom, and it requires a lot of unwinding, a lot of stuff that you don't have time to deal with, but you have to, because that capital is on your cap table. So be very, very careful of the capital you need and make sure you need it.
Powerful lessons. Autumn, tell us a little bit about the founders and the impact that money from the venture capitalists can mean to the company if they take the wrong type of capital.
Great question. If you just look at the industry, and I'm speaking in generalizations, not every venture firm is like this. So really understand the industry of a capital you're going to take, number one. But if you just look at the industry, and if we're operating in an industry where we suggest that it's high risk, high reward, we tout it as a feature, not a bug, which is a question, but it's a feature, high risk, high reward. We know that the success rate is very low for venture-backed CEOs. The success rate for our LPs, our portfolio write-up, not your success rate. So again, know who the customer is, know the game you're playing, because when you think about the pressure cooker of an environment that you're stepping into, which doesn't mean it's a bad one, just know what you're stepping into. It is high margin, high growth. The expectations, the milestone expectations are considerably higher than most forms of capital. And so if you don't go into that situation having built a solid people, culture, and growth infrastructure first, what most likely is going to happen is that new capital you got, I always visualize this fire where you're just like burning money, you're like making mistakes, unnecessary mistakes. And those mistakes can be helped with just a little bit of an intentionality on the front end of building a very solid people and culture infrastructure, making sure you have path to repeatability, because that capital, it needs to be spent and it will be spent. But you'll look up and you'll have lost more of your company, which means you've reduced optionality for yourself. You will have needed to get to another milestone, but you might not have gotten there. And so you might find yourself in a situation you need more capital. Many times, the second you start to show that you might be one of those losers in the portfolio is the second that a lot of times it doesn't make math sense anymore to allocate more time, attention, and capital to that founder. And again, I am speaking in very big generalizations, and that is not how the operating rhythm of every venture fund, but just from a framework standpoint, think about it like that. Because you need to keep your company, your customers, your community priority number one. And that's really when I think about kind of the scenario we create and the necessity for building awake at the wheel instead of asleep at the wheel. And we've just kind of created this environment where it is almost incentivized to build a little bit of a sleep at the wheel. And so I really find tremendous value in a lot of former operators who've turned entrepreneurs, because oftentimes they're the ones that can deeply empathize with how hard it is. And they understand those nuances that do matter. Whereas those that have not been on that side of the table might understand in theory what happens, but theory is lovely until reality happens. That spreadsheet in theory of my forecast of 1.5 million new bookings, wonderful on a spreadsheet. That is not reality, and that's not what happened.
I like the idea of founder-friendly investors, and there's a couple of the metrics in the venture capital world is out of 10 companies, 1 or 2 make it, and you have 6 or 7 dogs and 2 or 3 in the middle, and really they're betting on the 1 or 2 or 3 that make it.
They are.
But you're a founder. You're not just a metric. You want to be one of the, at least to succeed. And so I can see the beauty of the founder-friendly capital.
It's absolutely a difference when you have someone around the table who's been there before, because so many times, and I'm sure you know this, Kurt, so many times when you're an entrepreneur or a founder, you may not even know the question you should be asking. But there's something, and it's a really hard problem to solve. And having people who have been there before, who understand these nuances that matter, even if it just matters to you, the CEO. Like, if you're not good, no one's good. If we're betting on you, the founder, and you're not keeping yourself in a space that you are able to show up and be of your highest and best use for the company, well, then we all have a problem. And so it's really critical that founders think like that.
I love it. So Autumn, I want to shift gears. I want to go, I got a couple key questions I want to ask you. The first one is, it's a brand placement question. And that is, as you know, I wrote a book called Who's Your Mike? No bullshit guide to the people you'll meet on your entrepreneurial journey. I want to ask you, what is your favorite character? I've got Mike, the title character. We've got people like HR Rhoda, which I think might hit a nerve with you, and B player Bob. Tell me who your favorite character was.
I actually really like the HR Rhoda because I think she's misunderstood and ill-equipped to do the job that she needs to do. And I think oftentimes that comes from so many times in my career, I feel like I'm just kind of serve as this translation layer between two sides who are kind of the same thing, but like somehow the noise has made it to where we're not understanding each other. And that's how I view great HR and great people leadership. It is a critical function. Most people who get into HR deeply want to do good for the company. If you're in an organization where the CEO or the executive team doesn't actually understand the value of great people leadership, well, the HR person might not be in the room to actually have the information they need to have. And so we just have this like vicious cycle we've created of like, it's their problem. No, it's your problem. And the reality, it's probably both. And so I like that character because I think we have an opportunity to kind of step back and say, for today's businesses, for today's environment, are the same things working that once worked? And I would say absolutely not. When you look at most organizational cultures today and teams, people are really struggling with how to get that culture back, how to get that sense of energy and engagement back. And we're trying the same old things we used to do, but it is a different world. Work and life are fully integrated. There is no scenario where we're going back to what it was like pre-COVID. And so really having an opportunity to step back and go, okay, what are the needs of our workforce? And here's the beauty. They're actually quite simple. They need to connect. They need a sense of meaning and purpose. They want to have an impact and they want a chance to grow and to be seen. Well, that's actually, you don't have to spend any money to do that. That's the beauty. Now you have to think about how do we create that culture and then start to layer in the conversations and the amazing work that HR can do, which is here is our strategy, leadership. Here is our vision of a better place. Here is the people and culture we want, the people, infrastructure, and the culture we want to create. And then working with HR to be a key partner to help you execute that strategy. And so oftentimes it's just making sure that the right people are at the table, having the right conversation. And the beauty of that is there's aligned interests. HR doesn't want to be seen as irrelevant. And CEOs would love some help building a stronger culture infrastructure. Great. If we focus on what do people actually need, connection, meaning, impact, growth, now we can start to layer in tactics and perks and programs around that. And I see that to be the biggest thing today is we're putting perks and programs and tools and technology in place of strategy around what do we want this place to be like? Who do we want here? What do our values look like in action? Cool. Let's build that. So I love HR Rhoda because she's perpetually misunderstood.
I love it. I knew I was taking a risk by asking you that question because I knew you loved HR Rhoda. I know there's a special project you're working on that we don't want to talk about just yet around people and engagement and all the things. So we'll talk about that. We'll tease it for a future day with one of your next projects. So switching gears, we're coming to a time of the show where we ask you about your unlocking move, which is basically a key decision point or a point in your career that really changed the trajectory of your career. Maybe it was moving to Austin. Maybe it was founding You Earned It. Maybe it was any number of things. Talk to me about your unlocking move.
Yeah, this is a hard question for me, Kurt, because I'm someone who tends to believe that where you are is exactly where you should be. And so I could look at that and say, you know, the unlocking move that feels to be most relevant for me right now today is the fact that in 1 week, I'm off to do it again. And in making the decision to say, you know what, this thing in me, this vision of a better place that is related to what you were talking about, you're just kind of alluding to, I don't see a scenario that I can't do it. And I got to burn the boat. I got to shed what's in the past and only have one option forward. So I would say that's a big one, which is hard. That's a risky move. But it's less risky than not doing it. And that's how it feels to an entrepreneur who really does want to bring something of value into the world and actually kind of is crazy enough to believe that they can do it. I guess I'm kind of crazy enough to believe I can do it, or at least we'll see. That's one. You know, another one that I think is an unlocking move is, you know, the clarity of always knowing exactly who I am and what I can give and surrounding myself with people who help me be the best version of myself. Saying no to being CEO, I don't regret it because I was intentional as to why. And that was exactly what I needed to most likely have the courage and confidence to step into being the CEO role when I did. Moving to Arkansas from Arkansas to Austin 11 years ago was a big one for our family. It was another example, a little bit like today, where there's only one way and we got to go. And it really does remind me of the importance of kind of the culture you're sitting in and the necessity to be in a culture that really does enable you to grow, to kind of look forward and have that forward momentum. And I found myself really feeling like, okay, I'm so deeply grateful for this view from this side of the table and the experience. And I got to go that way now. I got to burn the boat. I got to look forward and just see what's ahead and just make the jump. And so
I love it. I love it. There's what's the worst that can happen, right? So I heard what I just heard was, and I love the burn your boat analogy. It's one of my favorites. So what I heard was A, burn your boats, and B, be yourself. And part of burning your boats is being yourself and moving to what you know you can and should and want to be, as opposed to your current situation. So that's an inspiration to many, I promise you.
Well, thank you. You mentioned this earlier, the chatter we tell ourselves a little bit. There's many times this past year as I was kind of building this new thing where I caught myself in subconsciously saying, oh, I can't do that. And then I'd quickly go, how will I do this? And just that small thing. But I will say I can only do that because I have really, really, really great mentors, friends, advisors around me, reminding me of that when I'm in the weeds instead of outside of the weeds. And so it's really critical that you have those people around you, because when you're the one in it, it's really hard to remember that. And it's a hard journey to build from nothing. So that is my biggest piece of advice, is surround yourself with your tribe and your village who sees you and lets you be you. Otherwise, it's a very hard journey ahead if you're going to build something.
Just as importantly, don't surround yourself with people who maybe don't have that experience or knowledge about being an entrepreneur, they like that safety. And so it's really hard for them to see you taking those risks. So make sure the people around you are not balls to the walls, risk at all costs, but understand you and what's good for you, and can give you some good counsel and inspiration.
Absolutely.
So Autumn, I consider myself the listener's advocate. If I'm locked in a room with Autumn Manning, what do I want to know? What do I want Kurt to ask? I had a couple. The one that I came up with was, Autumn, give me 3 key pieces of advice that I can take home today to help me build a kick-ass team for my company.
I think it's actually a little bit baked into what I said about perks and programs, tools and technology, like the speed and the pace of the world today and the disconnection that actually exists, whether it's from our media landscape or how we all consume information or how we show up. Very hard to see the forest of the trees. And if you now find yourself in this hybrid work environment, which I don't know who doesn't, I see a lot of people forgetting the critical currency of connection. Like that, we have this necessity to connect as humans. And it is actually a beautiful thing to be able to provide a deep level of connection. Like what you'll get on the other end of it is awesome. And so one is, don't mistake communication, tools, technology, perks, programs for connection. People need to connect. And so as a manager, as a CEO, how are you facilitating a deep level of connection, even in a hybrid work environment? Because you can. And so one is just that, drive towards that currency of connection. If you're a leader, are you delivering connection, or are you kind of removing yourself from that and letting the tools do the talking for you, because they will not do the talking for you? Another one, I think I said it a little bit earlier, which is really around keeping in mind kind of what engagement actually is. I see all of these companies trying to drive more productivity, saying that I just can't get that energy back. And if you just kind of keep that core foundation of what does engagement actually mean, because you can't get to high performance, you can't get to innovative, you can't get to an adaptable workforce without going through the lens of engagement, of engaging our people. Connection, meaning, impact, and growth. And if you just keep those things in mind, then you have this really cool opportunity to go like, okay, cool. What are the things that we have? What are the perks? What are the programs? What are the tools? Which ones do we need and which ones don't we need? And so I work with a lot of companies, and what they find is, we've reduced our cost. We've reduced the distraction tax, and we've increased our ability to actually drive that connection, innovation, adaptability across our culture, even in the hybrid world. So they sound really simple, but it kind of is simple. We actually we have more things in common as humans than we remember sometimes when things are really busy. So connection, meaning, impact, and growth. You don't need money for that. So make sure you're driving towards those.
I love it. Connection, meaning, impact, and growth. One of our core values at HireBetter is human to human, H to H, as I call it. We're not B to C, B to B, we're H to H. So that's exactly right.
I love that.
Okay.
I love that.
We're at now I have a trick question for you. And so that is, Autumn, tell me one thing that no one ever asked you, but you kind of wish they would, or maybe you kind of grateful or thankful that they don't.
Whether or not I wish people would, what I find is that no one actually asks, who are you? I was talking to a good friend of mine right before this, and his friend was starting this new recruiting company, and he'd just gotten fed up with how the state of recruiting today. You can relate. You guys do some great work in this space. And he was talking about just a simple question that he asks, which is, who are you? And I loved that, because there's so many times you show up in the world and people say, like, what do you do? What's your job? Where do you work for? And so speaking human to human, no one ever asks, hey, who are you? And that question, in the world of all of these labels that we have, which, language is tricky. You might think a word means one thing, and I think it's a totally different thing. But in reality, we might be saying the same thing. We've just used the label instead of, let's remove that label. Hey, Kurt, who are you? So I'm not going to answer who I am, because that would be long. But that's the question that comes to mind, because I think about that a lot. No one, asks, hey, who are you? Tell me about you. And I think we should bring that back a little bit to the work environment.
That's powerful. And everybody has a story. We all don't just show up magically 40, 50 years into life and we are who we are. We were formed by a story, whether it's our family of origin, whether it's challenges as a child, whether it's the things we go through as an adult in our career. We have this foundation and we have a story. get to know other stories. I love that question. Who are you? I would also add, how are you in this today's day of mental health, and how it's a big, it should be very, very important for people to understand how are you doing as a human. So I love that.
I think about like, what does it mean to be well? What does it actually mean to be well today? So yeah, who are you? How are you? And the last one that comes to mind a lot is, what do you need? And as a leader, as a venture investor, always one of the first calls with entrepreneurs is, what do you need? What does success look like for you? Tell me that first, and then we can get into us at Motley Fool Ventures. Then we can get into where we invest and the stage we invest and all that stuff that we got to get into. But what do you need? That's another one. And I think it's a really powerful question that we don't ask people enough.
Man, we could summarize this entire podcast with who are you, how are you, and what do you need? All right, let's go.
All right.
Last question. Where can we find out more information about Autumn and what you're working on?
So I'll have some more information to announce soon, but in the meantime, just LinkedIn.
Autumn Manning.
Find me there. It's Autumn Manning.
Just like it sounds. All right, beautiful. Manning. So connect with Autumn there. On that note, we're going to wrap this puppy up. Autumn, thanks so much for sharing your story. I love how authentic you are. You're one of my favorite human beings. Please go like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you consume your podcast. Give me a review. We need some more five-star reviews out there. Autumn, I'm going to start with you. Please do that.
Do it. I'll start with ours, and then I'll review the rest.
There you go, baby.
This was fun, though. Thank you so much for having me on. It was great.
It's been a blast, Autumn. Thanks so much. If you're an entrepreneur and you think you might have outgrown a member of your team, or maybe you've got a mic, as we talked about in Who's Your Mic, check out this quiz at who'syourmic.com/quiz. That's who'syourmic.com/quiz.